Kansas City, a city known today for its jazz, barbecue, and Heartland charm, once carried a darker reputation, one that rivaled Chicago, New York, and Las Vegas. Behind the neon glow of nightclubs and the hum of speakeasies, a criminal empire quietly flourished. This was the Kansas City Mob, a syndicate so deeply woven into the fabric of the city that for decades it dictated politics, unions, gambling, and even the direction of the entire American Mafia. Yet unlike the infamous Five Families of New York or the Chicago outfit, their story has been largely erased from popular memory, forgotten by many but never forgiven by history. Picture the 1920s. Prohibition is in full swing. Alcohol is outlawed, and America's cities are alive with bootleggers and mobsters. In Kansas City, a man named Johnny Lazia emerges, walking confidently through crowded streets in tailored suits, flashing a smile that concealed a ruthless ambition. Lazia, backed by a powerful democratic political machine, ensured that liquor shipments flowed, gambling dens thrived, and the police looked the other way. He wasn't just running rackets, he was the kingmaker of Kansas City, deciding who rose and who fell. But in the underworld, power always comes at a price. And Kansas City's mobsters were about to discover that the shadows they built their empire in could just as easily swallow them whole. What made Kansas City so different from Chicago or New York? Why did a Midwestern city become such a critical hub for organized crime? The answer lies in geography, politics, and timing. The city was perfectly placed in the heart of the country, a crossroads for bootleg liquor, gambling profits, and later, drug trafficking. But more than that, Kansas City had something few other cities could match: a political machine that not only tolerated the mob, but partnered with it. Boss Tom Pendergast, a name whispered with both awe and fear, ensured the mob wasn't just a criminal gang. They were part of the city's foundation. From judges to cops, from businesses to ballots, everything could be bought, and the Kansas City mob had the money to do it. Johnny Lazia became the flashy face of this arrangement. He was a gambler, a bootlegger, a nightclub owner, and most importantly, a man who kept the machine running smoothly. But his swagger also made him enemies. On July 10, 1934, Lazia was cut down in a hail of bullets outside his home, bleeding out on the pavement while neighbors looked on in horror. His death shocked the city, but in the world of organized crime, death was never the end. It was only a changing of the guard. With Lazia gone, others quickly filled the void, and Kansas City's mob would only grow more powerful in the decades to come. As Prohibition ended, the mob turned its attention to gambling. From underground casinos to backroom dice games, Kansas City became a gambler's paradise. But the mob had bigger ambitions. They wanted Las Vegas. In the 1940s and 1950s, as the neon lights of the Strip began to glow, Kansas City mobsters were already there, quietly skimming profits from casinos. Millions of dollars, meant for legitimate investors, were funneled back to Kansas City, Chicago, and New York, lining the pockets of mob bosses who rarely even set foot in Vegas. How did they manage this? Through the Teamsters Union. With control of pension funds worth hundreds of millions, mobsters could finance casino construction, then bleed them dry with skimming operations. The Kansas City mob, though smaller than New York or Chicago, was crucial to the scheme. They were the silent partners, ensuring that Vegas remained a mob town long after the world thought it was run by businessmen. One man in particular would take Kansas City's influence to its peak: Nick Civella. Quiet, calculating, and far less flashy than his predecessors, Civella ruled the Kansas City mob from the 1950s into the 1980s. Unlike Lazia, Civella didn't crave the spotlight. He preferred to operate in silence, pulling strings from the shadows. But his reach was vast. He had politicians in his pocket, union leaders at his beck and call, and connections to nearly every major mob family in America. Civella's most powerful weapon wasn't just violence, it was information. Through a network of corrupt officials, he knew when raids were coming, when wiretaps were placed, and which rivals were plotting against him. But even the most careful Don can't prepare for everything. In the late 1970s, the FBI launched a massive investigation into mob influence in Las Vegas. Agents bugged phones, planted microphones, and followed the money trail. What they uncovered shocked the nation. A nationwide conspiracy involving New York's 5 families, Chicago, Milwaukee, and yes, Kansas City. For the first time, the Kansas City mob wasn't just a regional power. It was exposed as a key player in the national underworld. Recordings captured Civella's men discussing casino skimming, detailing how suitcases full of cash were flown from Las Vegas back to Kansas City. Millions of dollars stolen in plain sight. The so-called straw man case became one of the most important mob trials in American history. And for the Kansas City mob, it was the beginning of the end. As the 1980s unfolded, the once mighty empire began to crumble. Nick Civella died in 1983, just as indictments closed in on his closest allies. His death left a power vacuum that nobody could truly fill. Younger, less disciplined mobsters fought for control, while the FBI tightened its grip. Casinos in Las Vegas slipped out of mob hands, union corruption was slowly dismantled, and the political protection that had once shielded Kansas City's mobsters vanished. By the 1990s, what remained of the Kansas City mob was a shadow of its former self-aging men, clinging to memories of power that no longer existed. And yet, for decades, the Kansas City mob was one of the most influential crime syndicates in America. They had shaped politics, controlled unions, and helped build Las Vegas. Their fingerprints were on some of the most important chapters of mafia history, and yet today, their story is barely remembered outside of mob historians and FBI case files. Why? Perhaps because Kansas City was never as glamorous as New York, never as infamous as Chicago, never as flashy as Las Vegas. But in many ways, that's what made them so effective. They thrived in silence, and when they fell, they slipped quietly into the shadows. The forgotten empire of Kansas City is a reminder of how power can grow in unlikely places and how even the mightiest syndicates can vanish when the light finally shines on their darkest secrets. Their story is not one of legends like Al Capone or Lucky Luciano, but of quiet domination, ruthless ambition, and an empire that ruled from the shadows until history erased its name. So the question remains, if Kansas City's mob could rise, rule, and vanish without the world even noticing, how many other empires lie hidden in the shadows, waiting to be discovered? And that is the untold story of the Kansas City mob, the forgotten empire of the American Mafia.